All right, so this is my pleasure to introduce to you Howard. And Howard Stein, it's an applied psychoanalytic, medical, and organizational anthropologist and consultant, psychohistorian, and poet. He's Professor Emeritus, Department of Family and Preventive Medicine, University of Oklahoma, where he taught for nearly 35 years. He's an author, co-author, and editor of some 35 books, including 12 books of poetry. The latest poetry book, Standing in the Chaos, was published last year. I strongly recommend it. It's marvelous. He's the poet laureate of the High Plains Society for Applied Anthropology and Psychohistorical Poet Laureate. And so this is official. And from me, I'm a fan of Howard, and he's my beloved friend. He's not only outstanding psychohistorian and prolific poet with a very wry sense of humor, but he's also a keen observer of human condition and a man of huge, huge heart. And now I would like Michael to say a few words too.
Thank you. So some people are called horse whisperers. I think of Howard as a whisperer to humans. One of the first times he and I sat and talked, I could not find words for something. As I told him that, I made a gesture I wasn't conscious of making, but he saw it. And in his saying he'd seen the gesture, he gave a sense the gesture told him what it was I couldn't find words for. And I felt intensely seen and intensely present to myself in a way I hadn't been for a long time. That's a gift that Howard has given for decades. Hearing his words, reading his writings, we become more present to ourselves, realizing feelings we have for situations, feelings we hadn't been able to know we felt. With him, we become more present in ourselves. Howard is a poet of the almost conscious who helps us become the poets of our own lives as well as of psychohistory. And so it is that Howard is dear to me and to us all.
Thank you, Michael. That was beautiful. And we are looking forward to your presentation, Howard, with a very, very cool title, Rabbit Holes, Bottomless Sinkholes, and Imagining Brighter Futures for the Psychohistory in Our Beloved Singular World, Earth. Howard, the floor is yours.
Good morning from Oklahoma, U.S. It is an honor to be invited to make this presentation. One of the things I love about talking in the middle of a conference is that if you listen carefully enough to what I'm going to say, is that at least half of what I'm going to say has already been said, and probably in better words and better feeling tones than mine. My title is about as cockamamie as I am, but I believe it is psychohistory and not just wild analysis. When I talk about falling down rabbit holes, going into sinkholes that become endless, and how understanding that can help us work toward a honest, brighter future in psychohistory, I am not veering off serious psychohistory. What I'm trying to get at is that through poetry, through literature, through music, through words that I just heard, symbolization, representation, reclamation of feelings, that we can get an idea of not only how to describe historical eras and explain them intellectually, cognitively, but to be able, through immersion, to get a sense of what it feels like to be in the age of Trump, what it feels like to work in such and such an organization, what it feels like to go through downsizing, what it feels like to go through Musk sizing. And what I'm going to try to present in the 35 minutes, and I have a giant clock to my right, and it still doesn't keep me honest. So I ask you to please keep me honest. I'm going to read some poems that are going to start out pretty dark and negative, and that I hope will end up with a little more honest light. And what I emphasize, honest light, is the last thing we need in psychohistory and in the world is working toward a bright future that is Pollyannish and is full of platitudes. We have enough of alternative facts and alternative realities. And as Seth Allcorn has written recently in the journal, where reality is so dissolved, there is no such thing. If anything, God help us, we need the reality principle. So what I want to start with is going to the title of our conference, and then a little bit the title of my presentation. When we talk about healing and understanding and overcoming huge divides and chasms, one of the first steps to building sound bridges is to understand what the chasm is, to understand what is on this various sides of the divide. We don't just start building bridges. We have to know what we're building on and building from. And that's part of what the why of psychohistory, the explanation, the use of poetry as part of, believe it or not, a database of feeling and metaphor and story that can help us understand what we're dealing with. So I'm going to start what I hope is not on a downside. You know, the poetry can not only help us to feel better, it can help us to feel at all, which in a way is what Marc-André's presentation is about, is that with traumas, dissociation, and repression, memory, feeling, everything gets lost. So to feel at all, honest feelings, is an essential start. So, and two examples. To me, and historians, great historians among us, such as Peter Petschauer, can keep me honest. If I were going to try to study the Franco Spanish Revolution nightmare in the 1930s, one thing I would do is study Pablo Picasso's Guernica. That is an essential text for that era. And here, now Ina can keep me honest. If I were going to study what it was like to live in Soviet Union from the early 30s through World War II, through the early 50s, if I did not listen to Symphonies of Dmitri Shostakovich, particularly, let's say, 8, 10, 14, I would have missed some absolutely essential texts about those eras. Now, you could say, well, how on earth can this contribute to a brighter future of understanding Spain or the Soviet Union or the age of Trump? They are, if anything, they're some of the darkest pieces of art in the world. But yet, I have a feeling that having the courage to explore darkness itself adds to a brighter future. So yes, we need to go into darkness with high beams and flashlights and candles. But I think Freud also taught us that we need to explore darkness itself. And that becomes a building block for making a bridge over these divides. So my cockamamie title, rabbit holes, endless sinkholes. Seth Allcorn and I have been playing and working with the idea of using Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland for probably, I don't know, a decade to try to understand what it is like to live in this era. And the image of falling into a sinkhole and the lid being covered over, and we don't even know that there's a reality anymore other than this bizarre, surreal wonderland in which Humpty Dumpty says about how to define a word means what I say. Now, people are all saying that. How do we know what reality is? Especially when, as I've learned from Brian D'Agostino, you need to learn about social structure and power. When images and rabbit hole wonderlands are enforced through propaganda, it is illegal. It is a sign of traitorship to even dare think that there's an alternative reality. Now, what about sinkholes? Well, sinkholes build on endlessly falling rabbit holes. On Facebook many months ago, I saw a beautiful picture of a sinkhole, a deep sinkhole in China, the bottom of which was an absolutely ravishing, beautiful forest that Charles Darwin would have loved because it is totally isolated from the rest of the biosphere surrounding it. And that he could have studied it like going to the Galapagos Islands. But then I combined the two images. The absolutely hermetically sealed off Wonderland and a sinkhole in which Wonderland is continuing to sink forever. And everybody in our group knows about the psychotic fantasy of endless falling and how god awful that is. And I am suggesting that through the metaphors of Alice and of endless falling through sinkholes, we can start getting a feeling of what it is like to live in this era. Now, when I advocate for the use of arts, whether applied poetry, painting, music, anything in psychohistory, I am not saying let's throw out scholarship. I'm saying that not only is applied poetry a supplement, a complement to scholarship, it also provides raw data that itself is a form of research data and interpretation. So I realize that's committing heresy. But I want to give you some evidence from a poet that kind of says the same thing. William Carlos Williams, great American poet, in his poet Asphodel, That Greeny Flower, written and published in 1955, wrote, "It is difficult to get the news from poems, yet men die miserably every day for lack of what is found there." Maybe you could rewrite that. It is difficult to get psychohistorical science and scholarship from poems, yet people die miserably from not knowing, not feeling the representations and symbolization that is found through applied poetry, through music, through painted art. Now, I want to give a caveat. Let us say that you hate poetry. You're allowed to hate poetry. But everybody here has an idiom, whether it's music or painting or hard rock or heavy metal or whatever. You can translate what I'm going to say about poetry into your idiom. You don't have to like or abide by my idiom. You can try it on for size and translate. A second form of psychohistorical data for our age, except it's written in 1919 by the great Irish poet William Butler Yeats in his poem The Second Coming. The very beginning. And as I go into poetry, I invite you to close your eyes and not look at me and not look at something outside, but allow your inside imagination and vision to feel and see what these poems conjure. First several lines of The Second Coming, written after the devastation of World War I, of which many psychohistorians have written. Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Can you translate 1919 to 2025? To put it in a very terrible way, I double dog dare you to do that. I want to read a few poems in the 10 minutes I have left, I think. Going from...
You have like 15 minutes.
Wow, I just won the lottery. Down the rabbit hole. One Alice after the other by the millions, billions, until we all have fallen through the rabbit hole from the crusty world above to the enchanted world below. Wonderland, unreal, surreal, the only real, where its rules alone apply, where both truth and fiction are equally alien notions. We are all its inhabitants now. When I use a word, Humpty Dumpty says, it means just what I choose it to mean, neither more nor less. So, end of quote. So, how can anyone understand anyone else? I say what it is and denote. It is what I say, especially if I have the power to enforce it. Why bother listening to you? This is Wonderland. It doesn't matter if we don't get along. After a time, even the rabbit hole vanishes in mind's midst, as does the very thought of any ground above. How could there be? Because there's only Wonderland. Was there ever anything else but ours? But how did Alice fall into it? Maybe she never did. Maybe it has been here all along. Wonderland, foreverland, always been, is now, will always be, world without end. No outside, no be gone, no beyond. Imagination futile. Who would wish to escape when ours is the only conceivable world? Could anyone dare guess Wonderland is a trap? A poem called Survivor's Wound I wrote a long time ago in the midst of downsizing, where I was, let's say, a downsizing E, and I was consultant to a bunch of organizations going through it. And Seth Allcorn and Howie Baum and Michael Diamond and I worked on a long case study of a hospital that was going through that nightmare. Survivor's wound. If none will see atrocity, does the survivor have a wound? If I screamed and no one heard me, would I have screamed at all? My torment is double, holes in my flesh and holes in time. I speak for the dying and for the dead. Affirm at least my scream. Nothing happened, you whisper back. Nothing. Your atrocity is but a dream. If no one will see atrocity, does the survivor have a wound? A very old poem that I have a wonderful old applied anthropologist friend who said he liked it that so much long before it was published that he put it up on a bulletin board in his office. And the students came in saying how downtrodden they felt, how they felt the future was impossible, that they might as well drop out of college. He gave them his poem. It's called Imperfect Leaf. Neither yellow nor golden, nor deep flaming red, torn, leathered, shriveled, brown freckled instead, irregular, worm-eaten, an aesthete's raw grief. I speak on behalf of an imperfect leaf. How do we get through the age of Trump or the age of World War I that William Butler Yeats wrote about? I draw upon one of my two favorite types of trees in Oklahoma, the scrawny, ugly scrub oak and the stately cottonwood. Maybe think of psychohistory and maybe getting through the age of Trump, the age of Putin, the age of World War I, the age of Nazi Germany. Maybe is a kind of cottonwood ode. Along a stream bed, cottonwood roots claw deep in search of water, for when the stream cracks dry. Their trunks, tough bark, a mail of armor fends off wind and rain, snow and ice, and unforgiving summer sun. Leaves shimmer brilliant yellow against the autumn prairie sky. Majestic cottonwood, a silent tale in wood and leaf of survival and of victory in a land that makes no promises. I'm going to hasten through lots of this stuff. I wrote a poem a million years ago in Oklahoma City when my wife, son, and I came out of not came out of, but were paying for a pizza as we left the restaurant. And this is something that gives me maybe one little flicker of a candle of hope towards some kind of a brighter future. It's called Moments of Connection. Now imagine yourself in a pizza restaurant, leaving, paying. There are moments of connection in this sea of desolation. I am on the North American Great Plains, paying for my pizza to two dark-skinned young men. Are you from here? One asked me. What would I reply to them, even to myself? I'm originally from Pittsburgh, way back east. But I've lived here nearly 32 years. So where am I from? I asked myself silently. Full beard and kippah, I didn't look like I was from here. To whom did I just give myself away? The second one behind the counter asks, I suppose while glancing at the kippah on my head, do you speak Hebrew? I wondered who these two were. What dare I say? I finally broke my silence a little, mostly Hebrew, to pray. They persisted, Ma shlomcha. How are you? I replied without even thinking, Hakol Beseder. Everything is all right. Though everything was not all right with me. Was I on trial? Were they attempting to make contact with me at some place deeper than the thickness of pizza cheese? Maybe I had passed some unstated test. I was no longer foreign. They beamed at my response. We're from Jerusalem. I didn't ask which part. A relaxed feeling now strangely at home, having felt like an alien, though this was supposedly my country. They said as I left, perhaps, just perhaps, they were glad to see me as well as my money. I want to read a final poem that may offend a lot of you. I wrote it in 1977. A dear, dear friend of mine in Nashville, Tennessee, who I was teaching with, sent it to me recently. And it expresses in an idiom that is definitely not Jewish, my soul of souls in what I hope we can work toward a brighter future across impossible divides. March 1977. And I don't know whether you can see, this is the typescript he sent to me. You remember mechanical typewriters, Hunt and Peck? The Easter of this life approaches, encroaches uninvited into settled lives. With the pain courses promise of vernal hope. Nature reborn, mankind renewed, history redeemed, if only by a faint hint. As Wagner wrote in Parsifal, Das ist Karfreitags Zauber. This is Good Friday's magic. The spear that wounds now restores. All partake of the passion from the sacred chalice. This is my hope, my dream of a psychohistory that can stare down the double barrels of the worst of us and being honest to the worst, maybe build some bridges across that terribly deep chasm where both sides embody the worst of us, the other side the worst, so that we can feel the best. Thank you for inviting me here. And I open this, I hope, not just to question answer, but to discussion among you, because long after I'm gone, you'll be talking with each other. Christina, Michael, Marc-Andre, thank you for the honor of my being here.
Thank you.